As Pastor Chris mentioned last Sunday, we're doing the narrative lectionary this year, following the book of John at this particular time of the year. And so, continuing on what she read last week, I read from John chapter 2, which is a very familiar passage of the wedding at Cana, where Jesus turned water into wine. What is most interesting, I think, about this text is it marks the beginning. This was the first time Jesus made a public appearance after calling his disciples and beginning his ministry, and the very first sign that he did to show who he was as he began his ministry among the people of God. So from John chapter 2. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus asked. "The hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now, draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water, they knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till last." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The gospel of our Lord. This is a text calling us to inaction. There was a wedding at Cana. Jesus was present. That's it. That's the big story. Jesus was there. Now, it just so happened that because he was there, because the host of the wedding had a need, Jesus was called upon, and because he was there, he could do something about it. And so Jesus started his ministry by doing something out of the ordinary. He turned water into wine. Jesus was able to do that because he was present. Have you ever been present for someone at just the right time? Has anyone ever been present for you at just the right time when you needed someone to be there? Our first child was born 6 weeks premature in a small town in central North Dakota. She weighed a little over 3.5 pounds, and as a result, she spent the first 10 days of her life in the neonatal intensive care unit in the big city of Minot, North Dakota. This was a very intense time for Julie and me, not knowing what this would mean for our daughter's life, our first child. We were delighted when we learned that she was healthy and that all of her body parts worked as they were supposed to work. It was a treat to bring her home as quickly as we did. But 3 months later, she became very lethargic. She wouldn't even cry. The doctors thought it might be meningitis. And they told us, "Get in your car, drive as fast as you can, and get to Minot, again, 80 miles away, and they'll be waiting for you. We'll call ahead. They'll be waiting for you in the emergency room. If you're stopped along the way, tell the state trooper what's going on, and they'll escort you the rest of the way there." We went as fast as we could. We made it just fine. Anxiety, as you can imagine, was at record highs as in the emergency room, I left Julie and our daughter Heidi into the hands of the medical people, and as they take her to the neonatal intensive care unit, and I turned to park the car. And there, in the emergency room, was a pastor friend. Happened to be my brother's college roommate, in the emergency room visiting parishioners from his congregation. He saw the anxiety in my face, and he asked what's going on. And he listened, and he heard my story, and he prayed, and he hugged, and he was present. And it made all the difference in the world. Once upon a time, many years ago and even more pounds ago, I used to run marathons. I know that's what you see, isn't it? Marathon runner. I know many of you have run marathons, so you know what goes into that. But in case you haven't, believe me when I tell you, it's a long way to run. And training is both a physical experience and a mental exercise. You have to be ready. 26.2 miles, in case any of you don't remember how far a marathon is. It's a long way. As my two running partners and I began the race, a few miles past the start, we saw this gentleman dressed completely in white, smiling, waving, and encouraging us on. We thought, that's pretty cool. About 5 miles later, we saw him again. Same guy, dressed in white, smiling, encouraging. We thought, this is even cooler. We saw him again, and we started thinking, he's here for us. He's our angel, we began to call him. And even though physically we were getting very tired, mentally we were anxious to see where he would show up again. And 2 more times we saw him as we ran that marathon. And when we got to the finish line, we looked for him. We wanted to say thank you for encouraging us and being there for us. And we never found him. But he gave us great encouragement and made a big difference as we ran that marathon. There was a wedding in Cana, and Jesus was present. The wedding marked the first appearance of Jesus as he began his public ministry. He was there with his mother and his disciples, pretty ordinary stuff. And because Jesus was there, he was able to help the host of the party when he was called on, and he did the first of his many signs, or miracles as we call them, during his ministry, and so it began. Now, you will probably prove me wrong, but I can't recall a single instance in Jesus' ministry when he sought out people to do something for them, to heal them or do other things. The way it worked is people heard he was in the area, and they showed up, and they asked him, will you do this for us? A man who couldn't walk was lying beside the healing pool at Bethsaida. Jesus was passing by, and he called out for help. And Jesus said, pick up your bed and walk. 10 lepers were on the road that Jesus was walking on. And when Jesus saw them, they called out to him, when they saw Jesus, they called out to him, heal us. And Jesus said, go show yourself to the priests. And they were healed. A blind man was sitting by the side of the road as Jesus walked into town, and he called out to him, Lord, help me recover my sight. Jesus spoke the word, and the man's sight was restored. A woman was caught in adultery. She was taken from the city to the edge of town, and there they were going to stone her to death. Jesus intervened. The one among you who has no sin, you cast the first stone. And no stones were thrown. Sleeping in a boat during a violent storm, the frightened disciples awakened Jesus, and with the word, the seas were calmed. You get the point. In all of these stories, Jesus was first present. He didn't come into these situations with the idea, I'm going to do something really special here. He was just there. And as a result, he was able to heal the infirmed, calm the seas, and save a woman's life. Being present for each other is a very powerful ministry. A child is afraid in the dark, so what do? The parent goes up and sleeps with them, lays with them, and they sleep peacefully. A family suffers a sudden loss, and there are no words, nothing you can say to make anything better. So you sit quietly and grieve with them. On the news, we've seen women coming forward with stories of harassment and abuse. And as they speak, you see people around them, just standing, supporting, being present. A memorable moment here at Trinity was the wedding of Eric and Larry, shortly after Minnesota approved same-sex marriage. It was a landmark wedding in this congregation to which we were invited. And the church was full, filled with family and friends of all ages who came to be present for the sake of Eric and Larry as they publicly committed their lives to each other. And by our presence, we added our blessing to the love Eric and Larry have for each other. Sometimes just being present is enough. It's all that's needed. And sometimes when we're present, we're given the opportunity to do even more. Maybe not turning water into wine, although that would be pretty cool. Maybe we're given the opportunity to say some words. Maybe we're given the opportunity to defend someone. Maybe we're given the opportunity to stand between someone and danger. Maybe it's to lend a helping hand or to do a chore or an activity for someone, to pray, to encourage, to comfort, to bless. So, maybe I exaggerated a little bit when I began by saying this text is a call to inaction, because being present in and of itself is something we do for the sake of others, with the hope that our presence matters. Sometimes it's being present in our normal everyday lives, wherever that takes us. Sometimes it's saying yes to an invitation. Sometimes it's purposefully being present for the sake of someone else because we know they need us there. I realize it's not always easy to be present. It's hard to sit quietly without saying a word. It's hard to stand up for someone, especially when you're standing for something that isn't necessarily popular. It's hard to break out of the rhythms of our life to be present for someone else when it's easier to sit in our chair and watch our favorite TV program and rest after a hard day's work or on a weekend that's free. It's hard to step out of our comfort zones to be present for someone else. But being present for someone else can make a big difference. When we sit with a grieving family, the result is comfort for those who are grieving. When we're present at a wedding, the result is we add our blessing to the event. When we stand with someone who is abused, the result is we help them work toward recovery and hopefully help stop abuse. When Jesus turned water into wine, the result was that the disciples saw him in a new light, and they believed. Maybe, ultimately, that's why our presence is so important too. So that when people see us, present for the sake of others, and see how we love and forgive and bless and help, maybe they too will see Jesus in a new light and believe. Amen.